This is the first of the panel discussions, and today we have a wonderful panel for our topic today, which is optimizing the security researcher and CSO relationship. Acting as our host today is Bill Boney with T-Mobile, and hopefully you guys will enjoy this session. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Bill Boney. I'm the CISO for T-Mobile. That's a carrier operator here in the domestic U.S. if there's any folks who are not from the mainland of the U.S. Of the members of our esteemed panel, I actually have the least qualifications to be standing here and pontificating with my colleagues in the community about how to work collectively. So what I'm going to do, though, is give each one of my counterparts an opportunity to step forward, introduce themselves, and then I'll resume this esteemed position of pointing to you all to answer questions. Okay?
Good morning, everybody. My name is David Litchfield. I am recently retired. I used to work for a company called NGS Software, and I'm more on the, well, not more on the research side of things. I am on the research side of things, and I frequently have conversations with gentlemen such as these on my right about such things as improving the way in which we collaborate together, because obviously, working towards the common goal of securing the internet economy. Actually, that was an at-stake phrase from a long time ago. They drilled that one in, didn't they? So, but seriously, it's all about improving that relationship to ensure that customers are protected. So that's passing on to John.
My name is John Stewart, Vice President, Chief Security Officer, Cisco Systems. I also hold the dubious honor of being at the company that last tried to goof up the security researcher / commercial relationship, and we've made all the newspapers at Black Hat for a number of years. We're looking forward to one of your companies doing something spectacular, so that way we can get off that hook. Feel free to do it this year. The combination of elements, the nature, frankly, that I've got a little bit of nerve-wracking experience, and this was talked about the executive forum yesterday, is we're watching, in fact, a significant change in which vulnerability data is being generated at an almost unbelievable pace, and the ability of both vendors to respond quickly enough, but then additionally for us to even know that it's being generated would move to a split economy. Essentially, we've got a research community that's dedicated towards exactly what David just described, who's been doing that for a number of years, and now there's a research community that we're having to look for that's in fact doing it for a completely different purpose. So I can't tell you that I've got all the answers in terms of how Cisco is going to respond to it, but I can tell you that we have had a long-standing practice of working with the research community, and hopefully it's continually improving as we expand our net towards bringing them and you and our company into the fold towards actually getting to the point that David made. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Bob Lentz. I was the former CISO for the Department of Defense for about 10 years and retired in October. I'm not diving and really retired. Wish I was, but I'm currently doing some consultancy work and enjoying myself, trying to play some golf. But this is a topic that is very, very near and dear to my heart, because I think most people in this community really do believe that we really aren't as focused in terms of our research priorities, and we also are not as focused on those leap ahead opportunities that we really need to get more involved in. And so, it's one of these things that if we don't pull together the research community and the CISOs and the other security leadership are not working very closely to galvanize those activities. Jeff's point this morning in the keynote about, hey, we've been doing this for 13 years. Well, we still have all these issues at the heart of trying to protect the internet. Well, what are we doing about those? And so I think this panel is on point in terms of trying to figure out the path ahead. And so it's, I think it's going to be fun today with this group, maybe having this discussion. I'm glad you all were able to find the conference room. So look forward to this discussion. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Alex Stamos. I'm one of the founders of ISEC Partners, and have the dubious distinction of having to be in charge of the research and evangelism part of our business while trying to balance that with running a white hat sellout firm. I think would be called a DEF CON. And so, have to deal with it on both sides, right? We have our researchers who are very interested in finding flaws and talking about them publicly and getting them fixed, and have to balance that with the fact that when you, at a certain point, when you're inside, when you're working with these companies, when you have 170-page master services agreements with them, it becomes a much more difficult thing to understand what the responsible and responsible disclosure means, and how you can properly work with somebody as a client at the same time you're treating them as somebody else on the other side of a disclosure process. So, looking forward to it.
Good morning. I'm Andrew Cushman. I'm a director at Microsoft in the Trustworthy Computing Group. Over the past couple of years, I've been responsible for the Microsoft Security Response Center, as well as for spearheading some culture change within Microsoft in terms of the outreach to the security community, or actually we now call it the security ecosystem, outreach to the security ecosystem. Helped found the Blue Hat Security Conference, that's the internal hacker conference at Microsoft. Although I am less involved on a day-to-day basis with the researcher relationships, I'm still quite active on the periphery. And I am also looking forward to this conversation.
Okay, so now you have the pedigree for all of the qualified folks sitting on this side of the panel. We're not going to go around and do any audience at this point in the discussion, but I thought, again, typically whenever I bring an issue forward to management, the first thing I get asked is, well, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And what's the business issue that's really at the core of this? So I'd like to get we have essentially at least two different elements here. The research community with their various agendas and drivers. We have the operational and development side of folks in the community. So I thought, again, what's the problem? What's the issue? Why are we having a panel of black hat on something that seems to be very straightforward to me?
Well, normally we see eye to eye. I think, for a long time, I've certainly been on the responsible disclosure side of things, and we're underrepresented here in terms of those who believe in full disclosure without reporting to the vendor. So I'm going to play devil's advocate for the time being. And in answering that question, we often see, too often we see issues where even well-known researchers find a security bug and they report it to the vendor does not meet their expectations, and that precipitates full disclosure immediately. And of course, we saw this the other day with Tavis Omendi's, Microsoft Help Center work, and he released this information, publicly, and a couple of weeks later, exploitation started taking place, and so on. And I think really that's why even today we still have to have a panel like this, because there are still, really, I would say infamous, famous, whatever kind of cases happening still today, when one would expect there wouldn't be. After 10 years or 12, 15 years, one would expect all these issues to be smoothed out. There's a couple more aspects, of course, and a lot of security researchers, well-known security researchers, Charlie Miller, Dino, Alexander Sotorov, all of these researchers have got together and said, no more free bugs. Basically, they see that, that they do all this great research, find these wonderful flaws, but they don't feel that there's any recognition coming back from the vendors monetarily, other than obviously this tiny wee, a thanks clause at the bottom of a security advisory and so on, and they feel that their work is being underappreciated. And in certain respects, I guess they could argue that that's true, and a lot of the marketplace is certainly from the vendor side, is leaning towards that way. For example, both Google and Mozilla now offer bug bounties, so in answer to that whole no more free bugs, that's sort of beginning to be replaced now by a sort of bug bounty thing. And I wanted to ask these guys, especially Microsoft, what are your thoughts on bug bounties these days, when you don't consider it as extortion?
I'm going to answer a different question. I'm going to answer Bob's question, which is, what problem are we solving? And I think that the problem that we're solving, the reason that there's disagreement here is how do we best secure computers? I think there's agreement at the high level on the goal that researchers and vendors and researchers and enterprises would like to improve the security of the computing infrastructure. There's disagreement on exactly what the best way to do that is. And there's also differing sets of motivation. Some vendors are more motivated than others to release security updates on a timely manner. Some people take them more seriously than others. So one, there's disagreement on what are the best tactics, and then there isn't the same agreement on what the relative priority of those actions are. And this isn't any different than a normal business problem where you've got different silos or different factions or different stovepipes that view a problem differently. And how do you actually then bridge across that to a common understanding? That's one dimension of the problem. The other that John talked about earlier is that the environment, the external environment, is changing very rapidly at this point. And so the motivation is not just about for the common good. The motivation now is often for how do I go and make a legitimate earning or legitimate living out of this? How do I translate this work into revenue? Microsoft is a firm believer. We understand that the issues, the vulnerabilities, do have value. Again, we don't see eye to eye with the security researchers on the best way, on the tactics for improving security. Computer security. We don't also see eye to eye on the tactics for how to best compensate security researchers. So a bug bounty is not necessarily the way that we think is the best way to go forward with that.
To the original question, I think the reason we have to have this panel is that the responsible disclosure consensus that Dave referred to is kind of falling apart. That maybe a couple of years ago, the white hat community, based upon the economic realities at the time, which was people did research to either build the reputation of their company so they could sell service or product, or to improve the product they sell, like the EI guys find all these bugs so that their scanner's better, that economic incentive on the white hat side has become much more diverse. That now you have people like Soderov and Dino and folks who go out either by themselves or with small little groups that are writing exploits and selling them. And the largest, consumer of these exploits is actually the U.S. government. It is creating a huge, as far as from talking to these folks, a lot of them have one client, and that client is a 3-letter agency. And that's creating a different economic incentive that goes against responsible disclosure because now ODAs have value. And I think on the defense side that we also see ourselves on, we're finding that, responsible disclosure or any kind of disclosure doesn't make software better. The only, when I see software get better, and I think Windows is a good example of something that's gone better, it's because of concerted engineering effort to change how the software is written, how it's architected, and how it's tested internally. I can't think of a single product where I say, oh, well, they found, 55 CVEs, and those have all been patched, and therefore it's great now, right? Responsible disclosure is not about making software better. It's about managing munitions, right? And we got tied up in a certain famous series of break-ins that happened earlier this year that may or may not have been done by a certain People's Republic. And in that, it was ODA after ODA was used in a bunch of different products. And it kind of demonstrated to me that, responsible disclosure is just kind of it's a little bit silly because the people that are doing this professionally, if they have 3 or 4 researchers and a couple of exploit developers, when they're ready to attack a company or another government, they can just reach into their bucket of ODAs. And that bucket of ODAs has very little overlap with the bucket of public things that have been discussed and are being patched. So I think responsible disclosure almost has become it's a sideshow and a nice thing to talk about, and has very little to do with the actual security of most enterprises these days. That's just my opinion.
So Bob's going to defer all questions and just hand the mic over, since he's retired playing golf, is what he's telling me. So there are a couple of things that I think this boils down to. If I take the original question and then I take David's comments, I think